Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Freedom of Information Masterclass. My name is Marcus Rowie and I'm an event coordinator at the Walkley Foundation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Just a bit of housekeeping. All attendees today have their video and microphones muted, so we can't see you, we can't hear you. However, if you would like to ask a question, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to use it throughout the presentation and type in your questions. Due to the number of attendees, we may not get to every question today, but we will try our best. After the event, we're going to send out a really brief feedback form just to help the Walkley Foundation understand a few things about these online classes, whether you'd like to access more classes in the future and what topics you'd like to see covered. We'd love your feedback, so please do fill out those forms if you have a couple of minutes. Okay, and to begin, so Australia has a vibrant creative community that informs, inspires, and delights the nation. And in part, that is because the Copyright Agency has been standing up for creators since 1974. Copyright Agency licenses text and images to content users and ensures content creators receive fair payment for those copied works. Each year, Copyright Agency's members allocate 1.5% of the company's income to a wide variety of projects assisting writers, artists, publishers, and the Australian cultural community through the Cultural Fund. We would like to thank the Copyright Agency for their support of this event. And now to introduce our trainer for today. Alison Sandy is a multi-award-winning journalist who has been lodging freedom of information applications since starting her career 20 years ago. Alison joined Seven Network in 2014 to become the nation's first female FOI editor. Last year, she lodged almost 800 applications nationwide. On average, the Seven Network puts to 3 FOI-related stories a week. Alison is a fierce advocate of the media's role in holding governments and its representatives to account. She's successfully fought and won several appeals for access to documents under FOI laws and uncovered details that have contributed to positive changes in legislation. Some of Alison's more successful investigations include revealing the extent of child brides in Australia, where children are regularly being forced to marry much older men, and a year-long FOI investigation into the extent of sexual assaults across the nation's 39 universities. For the latter, she won an award from the United Nations Association of Australia for the promotion of gender equality, empowerment of women and girls. Most recently, she has taken on the role of executive producer of the global hit podcast, The Lady VANISHES. So, in just a moment, I'll throw it over to Alison to begin the session.
Hello. I gather that I'm on now. It's a little bit hard. I haven't done one of these before, so forgive me, but it's great to be here talking about something that I'm so passionate about. Freedom of information is just something that I was interested in from the first time we did one. Well, I think it was only one lesson on it at university, but straight away I'm thinking, oh, that's great, you know, so they have to give us this information. So that's always been something for me. But we have got a slideshow that we're going to start. I think Marcus is getting that one up now. But just briefly, I guess the great thing that I can let you know with my experience here is that I'm from Queensland. At least, you know, most of my life has been in Queensland. And I went to QUT. I started at my first part-time job was at the Bayside Bulletin Redland Times. And then I went back down, down to Victoria and started doing regional reporting, Mildura, Win TV, Quest newspapers, came back to Queensland, and then Sunday Mail Adelaide, Channel 9 Adelaide, Courier Mail Brisbane, and then finally I'm at 7 News. And I've been there now for 6 years. And I've been loving it. Being able to specialise in something I'm really passionate about with freedom of information has just been an absolute dream. So it wasn't until I was at 7 News that I got to do it globally. At the Courier Mail, I did right to information. I was the right to information editor there for a few years, but I always did right to information applications. And at 7, I get to do it globally, so I get to compare. So we will go to the next slide. Now, usually I do these sessions in 2 hours, so we're doing it in 1 hour. So I'm thinking I won't take any questions until probably about halfway through. I'll get through a few of these informative slides first. First of all, I just thought it'd be good so that you can see how we compare to other states and federally. Queensland is unfortunately the biggest deterrent or factor that inhibits freedom of information in Queensland is the price. As you will see here in this slide, we have the most expensive fee, $50.80 compared to the next one, which is South Australia, which is $36.75. Now, that's a big difference, particularly when you're doing multiple applications like I do. So federally, it's free, but the downside with federal applications is you almost always struggle getting anything out of them. So in Queensland, even though you pay more, you get more. So there is that benefit. It's probably not the best act. I would say the best act now, even though I've been doing Queensland for a lot longer, I'd say New South Wales has the best act. But, you know, I guess the purpose of this, it's irrelevant to tell you why I think that, but I just think it's a little bit more streamlined. They're both the newest acts, 2009. You'll find with freedom of information, the age of the act is has a direct correlation with I guess how good it is. So we have the newest act up here and in New South Wales as well, 2009, and they are by far the best acts to acquire information. Part of that obviously is moving with technology. I mean, you look at some of the others that go back to 1982. I mean, we didn't have half the technology, probably not even a quarter of the technology that we have now, and being able to acquire even CCTV and body-worn camera footage, just upgrading the act so that it takes into account those sorts of aspects. And for someone who works in television, that's very relevant. So, but I guess it, you know, as we move and we become multimedia, even in newspapers, dealing, you know, you've got the web content as well, and you know, the more moving footage as well as still footage that you can get, the better. So that's that gives you a bit of an idea of how Queensland compares to the other states. Marcus, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll move my details too. So Queensland also has a pretty good portal, online portal. When I say that, that's for state government. So any department in the state government, for example, Queensland Health, Queensland Police, Queensland Transport and Main Roads, you can do online. There's an online portal. Even if you just typed in Google, a lot of the time I do these demonstrations at the seminars that I do. Being a webinar, it's probably a bit more tricky. And, you know, I could show you how to do it. But basically, it's pretty straightforward. If you Google Queensland Right to Information application, it will come up. And you just follow the links if it doesn't come up straight away. So with that, it allows for the different aspects of it. I will later walk you through that, just because it can be a bit confusing, but it is relatively simple. And the good thing about it is when you make an application in Queensland, if you just say you're looking for public servant, I don't know, public servant pay freeze, and you want to look across every department, you can actually apply that to every department. But again, the downside of it is the cost in Queensland. So it is a lot easier when you have an organisation like I do, like 7 News behind you. But that said, if you're looking for your own personal information or something that is personal on someone else's behalf, it should be free. That's information privacy, but I can go into that more if you need further on. So that gives you a bit of an idea. Federal's email, because it's free, and then New South Wales, a mixture of email and snail mail. But in Queensland, so you can do the application online, which means credit card payment. And again, that makes it a lot easier. Some departments still require checks, which is unbelievable in this time and age, but that doesn't happen in most cases in the application stage. So with that, you also have applications that you can make to universities. We might go to the next one because, yeah, here we go. So what you can apply for. So government documents, so ministerial briefings, attachments, reports, internal correspondence such as emails, text messages, letters, audits, reviews, and AV material, that's further down. So that gives you an idea of that sort of information you can get as well. Your own personal information, police record, medical record, that should all be free, tax records, and other people's personal information. So if you hear of a story of an MP who was dishonourably discharged, is one example that I've had recently, from the Defence Force, and you try to get that information, well, they will consult with that MP, and if the MP doesn't want that released, then they have to take that into account. So chances are you'll be fighting for it. But that gives you a bit of an idea of the same sort, like, you know, an MP is a little bit different because it's in the public interest because they're serving the public. So you can fight for that on that basis. You know, what else? There's been a few in New South Wales, I think. I think one of the ministers that turned up naked outside a house recently, they wanted the footage to that. Again, a tricky one, you know, because was it mental health related? There's a lot of grey in FOI and RTI. So with that, you have to argue the public interest, and I guess that's where the real skills come in. Making the application is one thing, but then seeing it through is another, particularly when you've got public servants whose job it is to stop you getting the information. In Queensland, maybe because I've been doing it for a long time, I find the public servants here not as bad as in other states. But we will move to the next screen if that's okay, Marcus. Okay, so these are the things that they will try to throw at you as to why you can't get the information that you're seeking. Personal privacy of individuals. Now that's pretty straightforward. I mean, if it is, you know, like you won't get, for example, people's names in documents or addresses or personal information. That's unless they're an MP or a public servant. They usually ask me whether I want to leave or have junior public servants' names in there. I usually say no, because unless it's relevant, there's no point. But yeah, that's a tricky one to fight for. So if you're after footage, you have to have their faces pixelated or blurred. Legal privilege is another issue. If someone or an agency has received legal advice in relation to any sort of case that they're dealing with, that will be exempt. Again, it's a very tricky one to try to argue into. So usually legal advice, and that's fine. Now, deliberative process, that's the advice that a public servant will give to, for example, in ministerial briefing notes. They will say, I recommend this because of this, and that's called deliberative process. And there was a case, well, it wasn't that long ago, where Campbell Newman thought that should be completely exempt without the public interest test, which is what's applied now. So we can argue for deliberative process on the basis that it's in the public interest. And the main reason is, as well, I mean, we should know what advice MPs and ministers are given when they make decisions, because if they go against them, then why, you know? But then Campbell Newman argued that, but they can't get frank and fearless advice if it's subject to right to information laws, that it can be released. They might hold back. But again, that's a pretty ridiculous argument, because again, you need those. The whole purpose of the FOI and RTI is that you can hold the government to account, that the government is accountable. You know, it's not as though they can't provide advice verbally as well, which a lot of them do, to avoid these being captured in right to information documents. But at the same time, ministerial briefings exist for a reason. They're there to provide, you know, that advice and lead up, you know, show the lead up to a decision. So we always argue for deliberative process, and there's not many cases where we won't get it. Confidential communications, that's a tricky one, but again, you can argue for that in your favour. Law enforcement and security provisions, again, a tricky one. It's another one that you sort of, the context, and you're always up against it because you're not privy to the documents that you're fighting for. So all you can do is give your argument as to why they should be provided, and then hope that it's in your favour. Cabinet information. Now here's an interesting one. unless documents are prepared for the purpose of cabinet, they can't use the cabinet information provision to exempt the material. So unless you have a case, well, this is for example, so just say there was something controversial that came up and they thought, oh, we better put it through cabinet then so that it has an exemption applied. Well, that's not possible. So if they just put it through cabinet without it actually being devised for the purpose of cabinet, it's not actually exempt under the cabinet exemption. Again, this is all sort of, it's a little bit complicated, but it's worth fighting for cabinet information, or at least getting that, you know, clarity from RTI officers as to whether or not it was actually developed for the purpose of cabinet. And if it was developed for the purpose of cabinet, there usually is a source document which isn't exempt under right to information law. So it's worth worth fighting for that as well. Prepared for Parliament, well, that's just exempt if it's prepared for Parliament, and you know, it's just the way it is. Information given in confidence, again, was the confidence, you know, was there something signed? It's something that you can fight for as well under the public interest test, which I'll go into a bit further lately. And then of course, will adversely impact interstate, international, interdepartmental, interagency relations. So again, that exemption applies, but you can fight for it. And it's worthwhile, I mean, as I go through the external review process, it's worthwhile fighting for whatever you can get, given that you're not privy to the documents. So, all right, so that's that one. Next one, Marcus. Okay, so this is a public interest test. So in a lot of the cases when you're fighting for information, you know, they'll say, what is it? How is it applied? Why is it so important? So there is on the website, on the Office of the Information Commissioner of Queensland's website, the public interest test. So you can see what arguments they have to weigh up. Now, not every exemption that they apply is subject to the public interest test, but most of them, a lot of them. So it's worthwhile getting to know this. Now, I know I'm trying to get through a lot of information quickly, but it's just because, as I said, my information session's cut in half. So when I take questions at the end, if I've moved too quickly, feel free to just bring me back to that. But that gives you a bit of an idea of some of the reasons that they'll give to deny you information. So it's about, you know, still getting that balance and knowing what you're entitled to, just like with anything. We might just move the next one. I wonder if I went through, Marcus. Okay, all right, wait, no, we'll move back, sorry, because I will go through and let you know the usual things that you'll come up against first off. So first off, one of the main issues that you'll find with right to information when you're dealing with, when you put the application in, you say, I'm looking for, and you have the material. So any example of, I'm seeking access to, I'll just give I guess a standard example of something that I'd ask for. I'm seeking access to, okay, police is always a fun one. Police drug driving tests, for example, that's one that we did recently. Police drug driving tests, the results of, you'd want statistics for the past 2 years just to be able to compare. Well, the reason we did it because we wanted to see whether it had gone up or down during COVID-19. So we'd want, you know, sort of the beginning of this year as well. And then you'd want a breakdown of what sort of drugs they detected. You want a breakdown of where they detected them. So they'd usually break that down into the precincts of, I mean, for me, we'd probably just concentrate on Southeast Queensland for the breakdown. You know, Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast. So you want the breakdown of those and how many in those areas, where they were detected. And then you also say, look, exclude things like duplicates, media reports, anything that's been publicly released already. And then what else would you exclude? You'd exclude, yeah, they're pretty much the main things. And then you'd say something like, I don't consent to information being deemed irrelevant without my consultation. So they have to consult with you if they're gonna take out information that they think that you don't want. And when you're asking for documents, you specify the type of documents you want. So you don't just say all documents. They get very upset when you do that. So you say documents specifically. I'm looking for reports and statistics, and well, statistics are often in reports anyway, and incidents. And if you want some that are captured on video, you say, look, the latest 10 maybe incidents that have footage applied. For example, in TV, we'd want that. So we'd say the latest 10, but we'd expect any information, any, this sounds complicated when I'm telling you, but if I do give you an example, it's not so bad. And you say exclude the, you know, personal information. So names, addresses, blur faces, that sort of thing. No, so they might come back to you and say, one of the most common things you'll get back at you is saying it's, well, first of all, they'll say, we want to clarify what exactly you want. So under the law, if it's electronically, if it's held electronically, they have to provide you with a report that that provides, even if they don't hold it in that document form, they have to provide you with a report if it's held electronically, which has the information that you're seeking. So with the drug testing, they'll have those sorts of statistics that they can provide for you. Police right to information. It's interesting when you deal with these agencies over a long time. They go through sort of a cycle. They'll be really helpful, and then something will happen and someone will stop this and they'll stop being helpful, and then you have to fight really hard. And then they'll say to you, you know what, with statistics, you can go to police media to get the statistics and we'll just get the rest. And then you do that and that works for a while. And then all of a sudden police media will say, nah, you can go back to right to information for that. And you don't know why this happens, but everything, it's just one of those things with bureaucracy that so I just put it all into a right to information, what I want anyway. And if I can negotiate with police media to actually give me the statistics, then that will be great. But you know, most of the time the reason right to information exists is because media units aren't helpful. So that's also a way you can do it when you're doing your application. The first thing they'll come back to you is we need to understand what you want. We're confused, so you try to make it, you know, clarify as best as you can at answering their questions. But at the same time, if they want you to narrow your scope, if they say that it's too large, under the Act, they have to assist you with that. So they have to provide you with information such as a schedule of documents, which will show what they've captured, saying why it's too large. Or they can say, you can say to them, just talk me through it. Just say, well, what exactly is making this too onerous to process? Because under the Act, you must assist me with the narrowing of my scope by providing me with information that I need to be able to narrow my scope. So don't be intimidated by that, just because they must assist you under the Act. And with a lot of these agencies, I've had these issues myself, so I've dealt with them enough times that down south where I did these talks before, particularly in Victoria, which has the worst FOI laws in the country, they will come back to me and say, look, this is what I've got, can you help me with this? So if you have any problems, my email will be at the end and I'm more than happy to help you. I will not be poaching any stories or anything like that. I've got enough myself, so, or any ideas. So feel free, if you have any, if you need some assistance with your right to information applications, I'm more than happy to help. Okay, all right, now we'll move to the next case. So just say you go through all this, Marcus, if you can move to the next slide, thanks. You go through all of this and you finally get a decision back. Now, the other thing in Queensland, you'll get a decision back and they'll say, oh, that's fine, you can have what you want, it's $1,000. Now, they have to send you a SEN, so that's an estimated notice, which tells you how much they propose to charge you. Now, in that, you can actually talk them down and say, well, come on, this is way too expensive. What is making up the bulk of this cost? And then you can talk them down to a reduced cost, and they'll send you another SEN, charges estimated notice, and then you can say, all right, I'll agree to that or whatever. But they only have to, under law, send you 2 of these charges estimated notices. So you really want to get it right by the second time and reduce. Depending on what they say, you just have to, you know, deal with it. You can just say, well, did you include drafts in that when there's finalised? We'll get rid of the drafts. Or can you, if there are ministerial briefing notes. If there's so many ministerial briefing notes, then why don't you just give me the most recent of those on that topic? So there's a few little tricks that you find along the way that can reduce the load and the costs that's involved. Yeah, so hopefully by the time you get to a decision notice, it's not too arduous or too expensive. So provided it was in a reasonable price, you then organise for the payment. Now, then if you get the documents back and they've, taken out all the good stuff, then you can go to external review. There is an internal review process as well that you can sometimes use, but I don't bother with that because it's a waste of time. External review, you go straight to the Office of Information Commissioner in Queensland. You'd make up the application saying that you don't agree with the exemptions applied, and you don't agree that you don't have to go into a specific detail. People think that that's quite intimidating to go through the review process, but it's not. It's free. You just send an email to the Office of Information Commissioner with your decision letter and any documents they released. And all you're doing is saying, I disagree with the exemptions applied, and I don't believe the public interest test has been applied accordingly. That's all you have to say. And then, but you have to when you apply in a letter form, it's not like it's an online portal like you have with the government website. You have to say, I apply for external review under the Right to Information Act, and then in brackets 2009. So that's the same if you're not using an online portal. So if you're applying to universities, for example, which aren't on the portal, then you will send them a letter saying I apply for, and then most of them will take credit cards. So if you contact them in the first place saying I've got an application I want to make, how do I pay for it? I mean, it should be on the website as well, but a lot of the time they'll just take credit card over the phone. There is also a document that you can, a pro forma that sometimes they make you fill out, which is part again, usually with the online portal. So that gets you back to how you would then do a review. So external review, you would, once you get decision letter, if you're not happy with it, you apply to external review to the Office of the Information Commissioner, and then they'll do the rest. I mean, they can then acquire the documents and go through them and see whether they've applied the exemptions, that they've applied properly. As I said, it costs nothing, so that's great. And then they'll come back to you with their result. They'll give you a preliminary review first and then say, do you agree with that or do you want to fight it? Most of the time I just, I mean, the OIC is a pretty good organisation, so most of the time you'll find that there's nothing that you need to fight them about. And yeah, so that pretty much gets you to the end of it. Fortunately, that's the best way to do it with the OIC. You can then go to the Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal. Can we go to them? Oh yeah, I've got that there. If you're not happy with your decision with the OIC, so there is another review platform. Most of the time I haven't applied to QCAP myself. I've actually been taken there. All right, next slide, Marcus. Okay, so as Marcus pointed out, we do quite a lot of FOI related stories go to air a week. That's across the nation, that's not just in Queensland. And probably not as much this year because of COVID-19. There was only everything sort of went, no one was interested there for a while, and any of the other stories that weren't COVID-19, so they sort of sat there. But yeah, and it's been quite busy with FOI since though, because there's a lot of questions to ask since COVID-19. So yeah, I lodge at least 500 applications across the nation a year. And as you can see, anything like crime trends, laser arrest, taser cam, red light speeding, mobile phone hotspots, surgery delays, school assaults. It's just endless amount of information. Councils as well have, pothole payouts is always a fun one, where you find out how many claims have been made. But also, and as I've got here, it's crucial contributions for big investigations. We might go to the next slide. Thanks, Marcus. Okay, so one of the ones that we did, which was on Sunday night when it existed, was the hunting ground, and that was about sexual assaults across universities. So the FOI we did was the base of this, but it wasn't just about finding out how many sexual assaults were at had occurred, excuse me, at all 39 universities across the nation. It was also about finding out how their processes worked. So when, and this is, you know, our examples, when the university students actually went to authorities for help, what sort of response they got, and then what sort of records were kept and how they followed up. And what we revealed was a woeful amount of documents or records that were kept, and the follow-up was ridiculous. So you know, they were basically on their own, a lot of these students, and it was really scary. So since then, all the universities have met on this issue and tried to get some sort of you know, universal policy in place where there is a better, more consistent, more thorough, more accountable, more vigilant approach to assaults at universities. And this is not just at the universities themselves, but in the colleges that are attached to the universities, which was another thing. And one of the issues there that we found is that you couldn't RTI the individual colleges. So that's when we went to the police, and we got we even got footage in New South Wales of an attack, you know, because you couldn't see the face, which was good, at one of these campuses. So it was crazy. So yeah, you can get a lot out of FOI. It's not easy. You have to, you know, go hard, but you can get there. Okay, next slide. I should just check that. What are we up to? 10:30. All right. Okay, so Lady Vanishes, which is my latest pet project. We have relied on the FOI laws a lot again with this, and this is on behalf of the subject matter's daughter, Sally Layden. Just a bit of background here. Marion Barter went missing 23 years ago now, and her daughter, basically the police botched the investigation, and her daughter Sally has been trying to find out and get action on this for, you know, pretty much the bulk of these 23 years. And it wasn't until our involvement when we started the podcast that this actually happened. And since then, the New South Wales Police have relaunched the investigation. We got a lot of the documents from the original investigation, which didn't really exist in the first place, which showed how they'd botched it in the first place. And then after that, we've subsequently kept the pressure on by applying for information under FOI laws. Now, well, in New South Wales, it's GIPA. That's the right to information equivalent. So that has been an ongoing thing, and we've been in the Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal equivalent, which is NCAT, in New South Wales several times, and we're due to go back there again at this stage. But again, it just, yeah, because they're delaying it for Sally. And they need to provide the information to the coroner so that she can make a decision on the inquest. So part of that process is us having to fight for whatever we can get, and Sally being able to see what's been done without it, nothing prejudicial to the investigation, the current investigation, obviously. But so it's just, again, that fine line, but keeping, I guess, government agencies accountable. All right, next slide. Okay, all right, before I go to the next slide, I might see if there are any questions, because I've gone through so much so quickly. So I'd imagine it's probably a bit of, let me have a look here. Okay, so I've got one here from Stu Late. I wasn't aware universities were able to be FOI'd. What sort of stuff is available through this process in the context of unis, and what other organisations outside governments can be FOI'd? All right, so universities, obviously I talked about the sex assaults, but basically anything. I mean, aside from personal records of students or staff that you're not privy to, information about, cheating is another popular one. You know, how many cheats are found, and ethical standards. You can go to the ethical standards branch and find out what are the code of conduct breaches of staff, like sex with students or things like that. Or it might not just be staff, it might be just sexual assault issues, as I said, that we already covered. So there's a lot in universities that can be covered. But as I said, the issue with universities is they're not an online portal. So you have to usually get the, you have to download the document, and then sometimes they can make, a lot of the times they'll make things difficult with the processing of it, like the payment and things like that. But Stu, if you have any problems, just let me know and I can help you with that. Just not being able to show you in the same way as I have before at these ones in person that I do, when I walk you through the application process, I'm more than happy, as I said, just copy down my email details at the end, just to, if you're having any issues with making the applications in the first place. I can also, if anyone wants to email me, send you a, if you wanted a pro forma of an application that I'll make myself, so that you can see how. Just email me, as I said, and I'll send you I'll send you an example of what I'll put in my application to start with. As I said, the application process is the first step, but once you do that, once you get through the application process, you know, it makes it a little bit easier, you know, with all the different things that come up, to be able to understand how you can approach it. Can local governments be asked for information under this Act? Yes, they can. Local governments are great. As mentioned, the councils have wonderful information that they hold. I mean, anything from, you know, parks, safety audits on their parks, with, you know, kids, you know, if there's been any injuries with kids, you've got the pothole payouts, you know, finding out how many people have applied or claimed for money, or sued them basically after damage to their car. But then it's the other way around, where local governments will sue motorists for, you know, running into something. It's a state government as well, running into a sign or something like that. But what else with local governments? I mean, I remember when I took over, Lachlan Hayward, at the Courier Mail, Lachlan Hayward, who's at the Daily Mail now, he was my predecessor, and he had a massive list of stuff that he would write, you know, apply for under right to information to local government, to the Brisbane City Council. It was incredible. You can do, what else? Yeah, parking fines, obviously, finding out how much revenue, the hot spots, you know, the top 10 streets that you're most likely to be fined. It's just endless, the different things that you can apply for with them. So if you look up, basically what I would do if I wasn't sure, because obviously federally there'd be a lot. If you look up the council and look at all the things they do, every single thing that they do is right to, you know, you can get information about under right to information laws. So you'll never be short. That's one thing no one's ever said, whenever someone says, do you run out of ideas? I never run out of ideas. It's keeping up with all the things you can do. That's why I don't mind. People, you know, will also say, why are you doing this? You're giving away all your secrets. There is so much in right to information, such a wealth here. I'm happy for everyone to try to, you know, get as much as they can out of right to information, because there's just so much. Okay, Jody, good to see you here. Is there an average timeline in which an organisation needs to get back to you? Yes, they do. They have to get back to you within 30 days, 30 days. And if they don't, then they're obviously in breach. But most of the time they'll ask for extensions. So they're usually pretty good in Queensland about that. If there's any issues, they'll ask you for an extension. And during COVID-19, we've had a lot more extensions asked for, but they still do pretty well. They seem to, maybe it's because, I mean, we do pay an exorbitant amount for a free right to information here in Queensland. So at the very least, they can make sure that they do it within a timely period. So 30 days, yeah, I mean, sometimes they can consult, they can have an extra 10 days during consultation. So really it ends up being at least 40 days. And then more, depending on the organisation. Police, as I said, the QPS at the moment are not good. They were good there for a while, but it takes ages to get applications back from them now. And, you know, aside from going to external review, it just, yeah, it can be a bit frustrating, but, you know, you just got to go with it. Yeah, but so the quicker ones, you know, the quick hits, as I said, are things like, I mean, it shouldn't take them long to do things like drug driving, or, you know, mobile phone hotspots where people get caught driving, you know, with their mobile phone. Again, you can ask them through media, police media as well, whether they'll do it, but yeah, I wouldn't wait for it, because yeah, that seems to put, it's a lot easier to go through RTI, I find. What information can be collected on charity organisations? Thanks, Samantha. Well, Samantha, charity organisations, I will say, a lot of them are private, but there's a federal agency which we've gone through before, the ACNC, I think it is, which governs over them, as a lot of them do, or you could go through the state government agency which oversees charity as well, charity organisations, to find out whether there's anything about them there. They'll often apply for grants and things like that. So there is a lot you can get, but not through the charity organisations themselves, because they're private. You can't. It's like with schools, for example, public schools. We can get information under right to information laws, but not private schools. But then, if you ask for information to education, sometimes, or even Queensland Police, about private schools, if you wanted to look for, I don't know, drugs caught on, you know, the grounds of whatever schools you're interested in, then that can be relevant. Or if, you know, there's been a couple of drug busts that have been public, you can find out what sort of history they have with that. So yeah, there is a way around it, but you're not going to get the sort of information you'll get if they're a public organisation. Michael, I've had several RTIs where Queensland government departments and then the OIC take far longer than is required to process an application. That is true, that happens a lot. Some departments are worse than others. Is there any recourse when this happens? Yes, it is the OIC, and as you say, you'll just be waiting longer. It's true. That's why you kind of think to yourself, well, I'll just you know, go to the OIC. For example, again, Queensland Police, which are kind of the, you know, as I said, tricky at the moment. I think it's changed since they've had a new person take over. The last guy was really, really good. But anyway, so with those cases, you can go to the OIC, and I just, you know, after 30 days, you just say it's a deemed decision if you're not happy. If you know that they've got a track record of being pretty ordinary, just go straight to the OIC and say it's a deemed decision, haven't got back to me in time, or don't grant them the extensions that they ask for, if you know that they're just going to take so long anyway. So that's what I do if they're really bad. But otherwise, you know, give them the benefit of the doubt. Like some people, some agencies, I know that they're working as hard as they can. Like TMR is probably a good one. Transport Main Roads in Queensland is a good one, I find. They seem to, you know, again, they've got a good person running that, so they seem to run it. They seem to do a good job with it, as good as they can. So I trust them that they are working as hard as they can. Queensland Rail's gotten better, another one. Liam Walsh, good to hear from you. Soon there is some sort of, I know Liam Walsh has done a lot of good RTIs in his existence. You want to see what the Minister's Office knows. What are the keywords you typically use to cover the document? All right, well, yeah, like briefing notes. Yeah, briefing notes, memos. If it's something specific and it's quite controversial, I don't know, not that you'd be able to get this now, but just say, for example, trad and, you know, the school, the Brisbane City Secondary College or whatever. You, like the opposition, that's a perfect example, what they asked for. And this is before it was subject to the CCC. Once it's subject to the CCC, which is the Crime and, used to be the Crime and Misconduct Commission, what is it, the Crime and Corruption Commission now, you can't get it. But the opposition, the Queensland opposition, got a lot on trad because it wasn't at the time. And in their case, they were asking for, I think, meetings, you know, so you want meeting notes, or, you know, diary entries, like to find out when she was meeting with the board or whatever, that in relation to the appointment of the principal of this new school. Yeah, briefing notes, diary entries, or just the diary, the minister's diary. You'd ask for text messages, which obviously they did and they got, memos, And I always ask for reports. I just do. I mean, reports cover so much, so they can't sort of wiggle their way out of it. But you want to keep the timeline tight. So the more information you know, the better, because if you're asking for all those sorts of documents, which are really micro documents, then that's when you want to be very tight with the time frame, so they can't say that it's too onerous to process. So preferably you want, 2-3 weeks, something like that. What have we got here, Greg? I tried an FOI on a prisoner being mysteriously released earlier. How likely would an appeal have been successful? Oh, okay, yeah. So I think you'd have. I mean, a prisoner. I think the prisoner stuff. I think is in the public interest. So I think I'd imagine it was a parole board or something like that. I would have thought an appeal would have been successful. It's hard to tell depending on the details, but I've got one in, and sometimes it's easier to do on a broader basis without targeting individuals about early parole releases or just released from prison earlier or quarantined or anything like that during COVID-19. So sometimes it's just easier to do it on a broader basis if you can, and then ask for de-identified copies of individual incidents, if that makes sense. When you're targeting an individual, it is harder, but it definitely worth an appeal for sure, because it is in the public interest. But even with pedophiles and things like that, when it's always got to be de-identified. Their personal privacy seems to be more important than community safety. So anyway, what else we got? I think that's, I have a chat here too. Let me have a look here. Okay, can you put in an FOI or an organisation that receives taxpayer and ratepayer money? No, not unless they're public. You can, though, find out, like if they're receiving taxpayer and ratepayer money, you can FOI or RTI, the agency that actually oversees it or provides that money, and get some information that way. So that's always a good thing, I think, to do, just go and find out what the parameters. I mean, you can find out anything about the parameters of that funding being provided. That's not a problem at all. Okay, I think that's about it with that. So as I said, I don't know how to. Oh, Amanda Gearing, good to hear from you. Work with your son. Can an inpatient at a psych unit FOI their own records? Yes, they can. You can get all your medical records. That's not a right to information application in the same way that that we would do it, because it's an individual getting their own records. Then they would go on information privacy, and it won't cost them, or it shouldn't cost them anything. So they are definitely allowed to do that. And I have a lot of the time made applications on other people's behalf if they have problems with it. So that's worthwhile doing as well. I think the thing is that you find, and this is, I might just go back to my talk here. So FOI is changing. So funding and resources. One of the big issues that I think we have with FOI, if it is personal information, like in Amanda's case, or with her subject of her question, it's a lot easier because people are entitled to their own information that's held by the government, and it shouldn't cost anything. But there are increasing tactics and obstacles, which is what I've got here, because the older an act gets, the better agencies get at being able to block information. But again, not all agencies seem to be, or at least not all FOI officers or RTI officers seem to be just there to want to block. A lot of them just want to apply the act, without there being any repercussions. Some things are harder. For example, Cross River Rail, if you apply for that with TMR, it's going to always be a tricky one. It's very much a cabinet. I think just about everything that they do on that is either confidential or for cabinet you know, so they make that really hard with the Cross River Rail. The same with the NGRs in the end, the non-generation, the rolling stock anyway, that they got over the new trains they got for QR. That was a nightmare in the end. They certainly made sure that any information on that, and they said a lot of that was with their contract that they had with the people that created it. I can't remember what the company was, that they because of that they couldn't provide it to you because they had a confidentiality agreement, etc. So that made it a bit tricky, but we still got a lot out of that. The cost in Queensland, that's the biggest issue, is the cost for sure, by a long shot. You know, that it's always about trying to negotiate the cost down with Queensland. We've also got the changing face of media. The mainstream media, we have less, a lot less, with you know, just struggling really, and what we can keep. So the more you can do, or the more you can be self-sufficient, the better. There are only 2 FOI officers, well, myself and Michael McKinnon, in Australia, and Michael McKinnon works for the ABC. So again, it's a bit of a, you know, it's good to do it. I think obviously it's good to do it like we do, but eventually I suppose we'll probably just end up having to look after ourselves. Government crackdown, you know, we've saw what happened with the AFP, Annika Smethurst. I'm glad that at least has resolved itself, but you know, there'll be more of that. And the challenges, again, the big issue is well, I think in FOI, the big issue is just getting through the gatekeepers, which is the FOI officers. So not so bad in Queensland, but federally, if you do a federal application, it is a nightmare. They use every trick in the book to make it difficult for you to get information, and you have to end up going to the Office of the Australian Information Commission, which is the OIC's equivalent there, so many times, just to get a scope in some cases. And then once they make a decision, and even then, yeah, it's hard to get information out of them, and the process is drawn out. But Queensland, I think, is a lot more vigilant with that in preventing that, but it still takes a lot to do it. And you know, I guess it's with anything, you do any round long enough, you get better at it. And with Queensland particularly, since that was where I could sort of cut my teeth with RTI, I know people within the organisation a lot more, and so they, you know, there's a little bit more, well, you know what you're doing, so we're not going to try a lot of these things on you that we would, I guess, normally. But just if you know what your rights are and you know what the Act, you know, what the Act dictates, then you obviously are in a better position to fight for yourself and say, well, actually, under the Act, you need to do this. So I guess to recap, and if there are any more questions, send them to me now, because I know we're running out of time. But just to recap, you should, the first thing you need to deal with is them wanting the clarification and the calls that it's too onerous for them to process. So if you can just work with that, just remember that it is under the Act, it is their job to assist you to devise a scope that they can process. Okay, so if they're saying the scope doesn't work for them, then they have to assist you. And the easiest way to do that is get them to talk to you on the phone, agree to a scope on the phone, and then send them back, or have them send you back the revised scope. So once you get the ball rolling there, everything should flow a lot better. And then it's up to you whether, you know, you're happy to give them extensions or whether you want to go straight to OIC. I just give them the extensions as they need them, because I find that it's just a lot easier to do it that way, unless, as I said, they have a bad track record, and then I go straight to the OIC after the 30 days has expired. So that is about it. But I know I've been trying to get through a lot of questions really quick and get through the information. We still have 5 minutes left though. So is there anything else that anybody wants to? Oh yes, okay. Yes, I don't know if it was recorded. Was this recorded, Marcus? I've got a question from Amanda, because she missed the beginning.
Yes, this is recorded and we'll be sharing it with everyone who's subscribed to our newsletter. So we'll include some information about it in the emails that we send to everyone.
Wonderful, good. Everyone will be able to see this again, which is always it's a lot harder talking to a computer screen, I find, than actually being there in person, be able to see faces and things like that. But you know, I appreciate everyone who's interested in FOI. I just know that sometimes I sort of blurt it all out because it's all here, but I realize it's not necessarily the easiest to take in. So please question me. Send me any questions you have. You've got my email there. If you need me to walk you through the application process, I'm more than happy to help you. As I said, I'm not going to be, you know, I'm not interested in poaching ideas or anything. There is more than enough for everyone, and you know, it's full on anyway. It's everything's, you know, I think at the moment I feel like us media and in the media, us journalists are, you know, it's about, I feel much more of a camaraderie. I mean, I find with FOI, I don't feel like it's a competition in the same way that you do when you're on a round, like police or everything, and getting to things first. It's, you know, everybody's entitled to use, it's a democratic right. Everyone's entitled to use whatever means they can to chase stories and get all the information on it. I think with that trad thing, I mean, for example, I guess it's the latest example of where right to information really has led to a really big result with finding out, you know, what happened, and I guess the process with the appointment of the principal that, you know, I don't think would have been realised otherwise. So it's such an important cornerstone of democracy, and you know, anyone, I think the more people who use it, the more we can support, you know, get behind its importance and realise how much we need it in today's society. So yeah, wait a minute, there's a few more questions. Let me just see before we finish off. Is there still a problem that agencies will release generally to all media the info you have paid big bucks for? No, they don't tend to do that. The thing in Queensland, and I should have mentioned this, is they have a public disclosure log, and they're meant to put it on that as soon as is practicable. But what is that? When is it practical? And you know, sometimes thing that I find that governments will do, if anything, is they will drop a question on notice. So something that's been asked, a question on notice in Parliament, they'll drop that that answer just as your FOI comes out. That happens a lot with SPUR. I find the SPUR is the fine enforcement agency, and you know how many fines, like how much debt there is in, you know, trying to find revenue that we're supposed to collect and things like that. So that will happen with Treasury a bit, but most of them I don't really find that. So yeah, touch wood, they don't do that. I don't know. I think it's seen as a bit, yeah. I don't think it's something that they see as ethical. So yeah, I think we're usually pretty good in that way. Anything else? I don't think there is. Marcus, do you see anything? Am I missing anything? I just want to make sure. There's so many so many things to go through. But there is, just lastly, there's a lot, there's any public agency, you can look up and find any government agency, anyone that, agency that is publicly funded is subject to right to information. So yeah, I'm trying to think of what else besides besides councils and universities. Yeah, pretty much. But it's got to be completely, you know, so anything, you know, .gov.au, yeah, but you could just look it up anyway. You could just look up RTI and whatever agency you're interested in, and it will say there. They have to put it on the website. They have to say that, you know, that they are subject to it. So yeah, well, that is just a bit it. I think we can, unless there's any other questions, I think we can finish up for now. But you've got my email. Anything else, please just let me know. I'm more than happy to help.
Great. Thanks so much, Alison. And thank you to everyone for attending today. Just a reminder, we will be sending out a quick feedback form just to gauge how you enjoyed the event and get your ideas on what kind of topics you'd like covered in any future online masterclasses that we do. Thanks again to the Copyright Agency for their support of this event. And we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.